Hello! Welcome on the Aesthetic Software stream. My name is Erika, and in today's stream I will show you asset creation in Procreate for spine. First I'll be sketching, then I think I will explain some of the basics of how to create assets for animation inside Procreate, and then I'll actually create the assets, talk about the limitations that we have in Procreate, and things like this. So first of all, let's see how big this canvas is. A4, 210 millimeters and 297 millimeters, which I think is always a good size. I prefer to use bigger files than what I need in Spine. I am gonna be able to resize them or make sure that the assets are gonna be big enough for not just what is going to appear in game, but also maybe your promotional pictures, videos, cutscenes, or anything that you might need. So I prefer to use something a little bit bigger, which means that I can use fewer levels. So sometimes I start maybe like this, and then I cut it to be smaller, like the size of my character, to have a good starting point. Another thing that I like to do is start maybe with a white canvas, but then I switch to a darker, more neutral canvas so that I can make sure that I'm not using colors that are too light or too dark. The idea for the character that I had in mind was to do something that would be looking in front of us, someone maybe, built like this, standing on a horizontal platform, so basically a 2D platformer character. I'm gonna keep it simple because I'm planning to use skins for these, so it's gonna be able to switch maybe hat, maybe have wings, a tail, whatever we want. I was thinking to do something that would be magical themed. This way we should be able to do various kinds of characters. Maybe there can be witches, wizards, but also devils, or I don't know. And I'll try to keep it simple. There was the temptation to actually draw every direction for this character, but mixing this with having skins, and then maybe I want to have some alternative poses for this character, makes things a tad too hard. So I thought, let's limit ourselves to one direction that's gonna make sense so that we can focus on one feature at a time. So yeah, I was thinking a character like this, and then another thing that is important when building your character is to imagine the joints. See these balls that I'm drawing here? That's where we have to draw both the upper part of something as well as the part that is below, ending in a ball joint like this. These two then overlap and get combined, resulting in the fact that the joint can move and rotate freely, just like my hand. I remember that some people on Discord were having doubts about how to structure, for example, a leg for walking, or how to structure pants, so I'll make sure to include a basic version of the character that can have those things. The idea is to have the character like sort of front looking, but mostly 3/4. And for this it's gonna be smart to have an alternative version of the feet so that they can stand in a neutral position, so something like this when looking in the front, but then also looking at the side for when the character needs to actually be walking. Okay, because this is one of those questions that I saw popping out from time to time. Also try to simplify the body of your character so that even if it rotates from 3/4 to a more side view, it's gonna look good anyway. So maybe try to simplify the shapes, because otherwise you will need a second set of the body so that the character can walk, and that complicates because it means that you also need a second set of legs, and so on and so forth, to be able to rotate your character to not just stand there but also move. So I'll do some doodles and then I'll settle on one look and make this look, as well as I think a neutral look, like the base of the body, that I'm gonna use as the default for every other skin. Usually I like to do eyes this way, but they end up being very complicated, and I have to consider how big my character is gonna be on screen, because If it is gonna be this small, then there's no point in using very subtle lines and filling your character with details, because no one is gonna see them. So you have to kind of also keep in mind the final size of your character on screen. So maybe I'll instead create something simplified that only has this, or my favorite, the eyeball like this. If it's just something like this, that's the most simplified and it's great. You'll notice that lots of games use this sort of eyes. They're very simplified and they don't require as much effort to animate. Maybe you can have the nose or skip it. Now let's have an in-between where I have some details, but I'll try not to overdo it too much. If possible, I'll try to keep them as similar as possible. It's even better if I can like take one and reflect it so they are the same, even though in 3/4 we usually have a shortening, so this eye is generally a bit bigger than this one. I was thinking to have something related to wizardry, because this way we can also animate some VFX within this project, so it's gonna grow a little bit in scope. The more we go around things, like the more we are forgiving by adding things here to hide joints, the easier it's gonna be to animate those. Because this is bigger than what it is attached to the body, it's gonna be simpler. If instead I had drawn something that is simply like this, that is very attached, or even worse, that ends like this instead of being a full ball, so the piece would be something like this, then it's gonna rotate and detach from the rest of the body. Okay, if we don't draw the rest of the part like this. Okay, so this could be one design. You can suggest me other designs. When dealing with characters that could have maybe a different build, the important part is that we make the joints overlap. So this is gonna be just a bigger version of these. Oh, he has the spine logo on a jabot. Maybe he's a sort of vampire. I'm gonna make them exactly the same height so that I can reuse them with skins. Here, something to cover the joints again. So these will be separate pieces so that they are gonna be easier to animate and to repurpose. Also these, I think it's gonna be a separate piece. The first sketch is always ugly. When I make the first sketch, always gets uglier. The second one improves. I think the third one is gonna be the best. Oh, Gorgon, I love that. Oh, I love Gorgons. It also means that it has that hair that it's like wobbly, and we can add physics inside skins so those wobble around. That would be very cool. I love that. I think we succeeded. Thank you for all the inputs. And now I'll focus on one of them. I think I'm gonna start with the vampire, and then I'm gonna make this a bit more neutral so that there can be some shared parts. I'm gonna make one dot, one that has the color of skin. Okay, other skin, and other skin again. Tinting works like we're using the multiply color on top. So if I were to try to get this green from the others, what I'd get would be this. If I were to try to get this pink from the other base pinks, I'd get only this, so I cannot make it lighter. If I try to get this color from the others, I could get it from the pink. Of course, it gets the same tint from what is already the base color, which is why we're gonna be using white for this operation, because we can multiply the color in Spine, and if it's possible in Spine, it's also possible at runtime, where you could have your users use a color picker to specify any color they want. I'm gonna be using a color for shadows, like for example this could be the shadow color, which tends to look nice in most occasions. I usually love also to go more on the violets, like this. Oh, okay, this is a great color. I think this is a good in-between, because it's not looking too terrible on the green and looking still rather fine there. So maybe I'll make it a tad lighter. And with this, I know now that this is gonna be the base color that I'm gonna use for all shadows. And you can pick it this way too. And you know that any color that you're gonna overlap here. Okay, when you change the hue, it's gonna work with most hues, blue, red, etc. It generally works nicely for shading. Perfect. Maybe I'll start pumping up the stabilizer, so I'm gonna make very smooth shapes. The straighter I can make the parts, the better results. Like this. Hold to make it a circle, and I have my joint. Okay, that's gonna be my joint that I'm gonna use as a reference. It can be the same size, or it can be smaller, bigger. I have more of these. Okay, here is where I need the stabilizer again. My hand is a bit shaky. First I'm getting the shape down, and then I refine it, trying to get this right, because it's the one that I'm gonna use for every other character, and it's gonna be the base. So I'm gonna use different colors to be able to see the shapes, and then I'll add details afterwards. The important thing is that how do we divide these to work for animation? Usually we'll have 3 parts. The one that is in front, there's the middle part, and sometimes there's the part that goes behind the rest of the body if it's long hair. So in this case I think we will have just the front and the middle part. The part that is completely not gonna be seen is less important, but still it's nice to have it smooth. For this, I'll lower the opacity here. I'm using different colors once again, just because this way I'll be able to tell the shapes apart. I want this leg to overlap nicely. They should be like this. Which means this body that I did needs to be reshaped to cover this part better, like this. So when I disable these two, I actually need to have this part filled. As you see, it's a shape that works better so that we can have those two overlap. Okay, I think that's a good size for the leg, for the knee joint. Ideally, I want it centered, and from here, I'm gonna connect these. I'll duplicate it so I can reuse it. It goes from here, down here, here, down here. I wanted to duplicate this. Okay, and then merge them, and then fill this, and then actually block the alpha and fill the whole thing. So now you see this can be a base for a leg, and it's gonna work perfectly, especially if I reuse those circles afterwards. Let's make the lower part of the leg with this part that I duplicated. It's like it's shrinking. I did not mean to, but I actually did kind of a straight line that continues from there, so cool. It needs to end in a foot. For these I can reuse that joint that I had at the bottom. By having these perfect circles, I make sure that they can rotate perfectly on the middle of these circles. That's where we'll also want to add the bone origin once in Spine. Time to create the little foot for walking, which can be like this, and another version of it, which instead is gonna be front looking for idols, more like this. I'll just change the color so you can see a little bit better. Okay, how the foot looks. And inside view is gonna be more like this. Block and fill. So basic shapes that look like this. For the other leg, I can just select these parts, group them, duplicate them, move them to the side as long as they are at the same height, and that will be it. Just move them behind. Of course, the part that is behind does not have this version of the foot that is front looking, and this one is gonna have it as the main thing. So we have that nice 3/4 situation, but we're also reusing many of the pieces, which are just recolors, which is gonna mean that maybe we can also reuse some meshes or some structures inside spine. In which case, if we decide to use this sort of setup, then we can chisel this part, so that instead of having this shape like this, so that I was thinking it could be cut, so it would be instead more like this. But it's not necessary, maybe. Let me think. If I'm gonna reuse directly this part to simulate that, can I just delete here a bit more? Considering this, because this is gonna be propagated to all the other characters if I keep it this way, I'm thinking that I'll just refine this one, and if it does not work out, I still have the other shape to use. Okay, even though it's not gonna be perfect, I want it to be cute. And that's gonna be my body. This is to avoid problems when animating with, for example, parts that I'm missing. Some of the things that I've seen people do is, for example, people that draw. Okay, they draw maybe the part of the arm that goes behind, but then when you try to rotate these, if you try to rotate it like this, you'll see that it's missing the part, okay, because there's nothing here, and actually people should also draw this part. Designing by having the joints in mind makes sure that we have enough overlapping space, and therefore makes it easier to have a character that won't have problems inside spine afterwards. But it's what I always do when I work also on other characters. I think I can show you. I did Spineboy in the Snowball. I did it in Procreate. I think I can show you from here. Oh yeah. So first I sketched it, exactly as we did here. At first I did the sketch, tried out the proportions, and then I started sketching the various parts. And then I started placing the colors using Spineboy's colors. So doing the base, here did the eyes. This is starting to be the actual final part that went into Spineboy. So you see I did the shapes, and that's the same phase that okay, this is where I wanted to get, which is around where I start making the shapes for the legs. Okay, do you see here? I first did the round parts, then I did the round parts overlapping those, then I did other round parts that overlap those, and the shapes, and until I covered everything. Okay, now I'll leave it go so it can play. And then after doing all the flats with shapes that could work for animation, I started adding the shading. Okay, so that's for sure what I'm gonna also be doing in this file. Some things, then I started adding the light parts, more details, started filling everything with details, and more and more and more and more and more, until the basically all the shapes were done and the file was ready. And that's the end. That's the same approach that I want to use on this other file. Well, at first I try to keep all the shapes flat, and I just make sure that they are gonna rotate super nicely. I want these characters to be able to walk as well as do other stuff, so I need to be a bit more precise with the joints precisely round, etc. I think I will finish this part of the arms and then stop here for today. Next time I will do the shading for this basic part, and probably also some of the accessories and maybe details. A bit more of a rigid pose, but it's gonna pay off in the end, and it's easier to position it so it the circle covers nicely the body. Gonna happen around here, I could have it like this, or I could have it actually a bit more outside, more like this, as long as I'm not too bothered by the fact that the overlap is like this. Yeah, it kind of starts from there, so it's not wrong. Because then, of course, when the character is gonna be in idle position, it's gonna have the arms like this. But for rigging, it is actually more useful to have it very straight pointing down, because then I can use automatic subdivision, it's easier to guess the meshes, so I'll actually have it in a bit of a more unnatural pose like this, that I can later touch up. So I think that's gonna be the end of today's session. So what did we do today? Some sketchies, such as this vampire friendo that was the chosen one to be done, Gorgon that was here, devil friend, and also the witch. We also did all of the technical, more boring parts of making sure, thanks to these ball joints, that all of the body parts are gonna move flawlessly. This very basic version is gonna be the version that it's gonna be used as the base for all of these skins. So it's mostly the common parts, except for some details of the face that are actually unique to the vampire friend. I will continue this project next Tuesday. Tune in next Tuesday if you want to see the detailed version of this first skin. I will see you again next time. Bye bye!